Imagine you are the CEO of a mid-sized manufacturing company. Your floor manager comes to you with a proposal for a new piece of heavy machinery. It costs $80,000 upfront. To install it, you have to shut down your most profitable production line for 2 full years, losing millions in revenue. And the projected payoff? Once it is finally running, it might increase your efficiency by about 15%, but only if the market stays perfect. You would fire that manager before they finished the sentence. You would call the proposal financial suicide. Yet, every single year, thousands of incredibly bright, ambitious 27-year-olds make that exact trade. They call it getting an MBA. From a personal finance perspective, higher education is rarely viewed for what it fundamentally is: a massive capital expenditure. When a corporation buys a machine, they run rigorous models. They calculate the net present value and the exact break-even point. But when it comes to the 3 letters after their name, most people abandon that rigor entirely. They are driven by prestige, elite networking, and a vague assumption of a salary bump. Today, we are going to strip away the prestige and look at the cold, hard math. We are going to see why that $80,000 degree is often a wealth-destroying trap. I am Tom, and this is Tom Talks Money. If you are here, you probably understand that your career is the largest asset you will ever own. It is the engine that funds your investments, your home, and your retirement. Because of that, deciding how to maintain or upgrade that engine is the highest ROI activity you can perform. If you find value in these deep dives into the mechanics of wealth, do me a favor and hit the subscribe button. It is the best return on investment for your time today, and it helps me keep the lights on without having to go back and get my own MBA to pay the bills. We are looking at a specific phenomenon today: the traditional 2-year full-time MBA. We are going to calculate the true economic cost, which is a lot higher than the sticker price on the brochure. We will look at the financing trap, where compound interest works against you in a terrifying way. And finally, we will look at the break-even reality that most universities would rather you not think about until after you have signed the promissory note. Let's start with the math of what you are actually spending. To understand why an MBA can yield a negative return, we have to start with a correct calculation of the cost. Most people look at the tuition and stop there. The average tuition for a top 50 program easily exceeds $40,000 per year. That brings the baseline sticker price to $80,000. If you are looking at the elite M7 schools, think Harvard, Stanford, or Wharton, you are looking at double that. We are talking $75,000 to $80,000 per year in tuition alone. For our math today, let's be generous. Let's use a conservative $80,000 for the total degree. But remember, you still have to eat, sleep, and live for 2 years. Now, some people argue that you have living expenses whether you are in school or working, so they should not count. I disagree. When you are working, those expenses are covered by cash flow. When you are a full-time student with no income, those expenses become a pure debt burden or a drain on your existing capital. If you are spending $30,000 a year to live in a city like Boston or Chicago while studying, that is another $60,000 added to the hole you are digging. But even that is just the tip of the iceberg. The true cost of a full-time MBA is not the tuition. It is the opportunity cost of your time. In financial terms, opportunity cost is the value of the next best alternative you gave up. If you are a prime candidate for a top-tier MBA, you are likely in your mid to late 20s. You probably already have a bachelor's degree and a few years of corporate experience under your belt. You are not a broke teenager anymore. Let's look at a typical student. 27 years old, earning $75,000 a year. By stepping out of the workforce for 2 years, this student is giving up a lot of cash. In year 1, they lose $75,000. In year 2, assuming a modest 4% raise they would have received at their job, they lose $78,000. That is a total of $153,000 in lost gross income. That is money that never hit their bank account. It is money that was never used to pay rent, buy groceries, or invest. When you add that lost salary to our conservative $80,000 tuition, the true economic cost of this MBA is $233,000. You are not starting your post-MBA life in an $80,000 hole. You are starting it nearly $250,000 deep. The post-grad salary bump has a monumental task ahead of it just to get you back to zero. If you think losing the salary is bad, wait until you look at your retirement accounts. While you are sitting in a lecture hall discussing case studies, your peers back at the office are getting their employer 401k matches. If your employer matches 5% of your salary, that is nearly $8,000 in free money you just walked away from over 2 years. But it is actually worse than that. Because you are 27, every dollar you invest has nearly 35 years to compound before you hit retirement age. Using the rule of 702, that $8,000 in missed matches could have grown to nearly $100,000 by the time you stop working. You are not just sacrificing your present income, you are sacrificing the most powerful years of your compounding engine. This is why financial literacy is so important. Most people only see the check they write to the university. They don't see the invisible wealth that is evaporating because they aren't in the market. By the time you graduate, the mountain you have to climb isn't just made of debt, it is made of missed growth. And speaking of debt, that is where the math goes from bad to disastrous. Very few 27-year-olds have $80,000 in liquid cash just sitting around to pay for business school. That means the vast majority of students are financing this degree through loans. And this is where we encounter a major trap. Not all debt is created equal. If you remember your undergraduate days, you might have had subsidized federal loans, where the government paid the interest while you were in school. That world is gone. Graduate student loans are almost entirely unsubsidized. Federal direct unsubsidized loans and Grad Plus loans currently carry interest rates hovering between 7 and 8%. On top of that, there are origination fees that can climb above 4%. This is high-interest debt, and the clock starts ticking the second the money is disbursed. While you are busy networking at wine and cheese mixers, your debt is growing. At an 8% interest rate, an $80,000 loan accrues about $6,400 in interest per year. Over 2 years, you accumulate nearly $13,000 in interest before you have even received your diploma. You haven't even started your new job yet, and your principal has already ballooned. This is the beginning of what I call compound interest in reverse. When you graduate, something happens that most students don't fully grasp until they get their first bill. Capitalization. All that interest that accrued while you were studying is added to your principal balance. You are no longer paying interest on $80,000. You are now paying interest on $93,000. You are paying interest on your interest. If you amortize that debt over a standard 10-year repayment plan at 8%, your monthly payment is going to be about $1,128. Over those 10 years, you will pay a staggering $42,000 in interest alone. So, let's look at the real price tag again. That $80,000 tuition has now swelled to $135,000 once you account for the cost of borrowing. Combine that with your $153,000 in lost wages, and the total financial hurdle you have to clear is roughly $288,000. That is the price of the 3 letters. Now we have to ask, is the salary bump actually big enough to justify a $300,000 gamble? If you think that $288,000 figure is the end of the story, you are in for a shock. We have to talk about the salary bump. Proponents of the MBA love to point to the Graduate Management Admission Council data. They show median starting salaries of $115,000 to $125,000. On paper, that looks amazing compared to your old $75,000 salary. It looks like a $40,000 a year raise. But this is where the illusion of the bump sets in. Financial literacy requires us to look at net cash flow, not gross income. You don't take home $115,000. After federal, state, and local taxes, you're taking home a lot less. And here is the kicker. That massive student loan payment has to be paid with after-tax dollars. To pay your $13,000 annual loan obligation, you actually have to earn about $19,000 in pre-tax income. Suddenly, that fancy new salary doesn't feel so large. We're going to break down the actual break-even calculation next, and it is going to show you why most people won't see a dime of profit from their degree until they are in their 40s. Let's run a side-by-side comparison. In Path A, the career path, you stay at your job. You start at $75,000, get a 4% raise each year, and by the time your hypothetical MBA would have graduated, you are making over $81,000. You have no new debt, and you have saved or invested a significant portion of your income. In Path B, the MBA path, you graduate at age 29 with a starting salary of $115,000. You have $93,000 in debt. At first glance, the MBA is making about $34,000 more per year. But remember, $19,000 of that raise is immediately eaten by the debt service. So, the MBA's real-world usable salary bump over their non-MBA peer is only about $15,000. Now, let's do the math on the hole we dug. We lost $153,000 in wages to get this degree. If we are only netting an extra $15,000 a year because of the degree, how long does it take to make back that lost ground? 153,000 divided by 15,000 is 10.2. It takes over 10 years just to get back to the same financial position you would have been in if you had never gone to school at all. Think about that timeline. If you start the program at 27, you graduate at 29. You spend the next 10 years paying off the debt and trying to catch up to where you would have been. You don't actually start building new wealth relative to your old trajectory until you are 39 or 40 years old. This assumes everything goes perfectly. It assumes you never lose your job, the economy doesn't tank, and you actually get those 4% raises. This is a decade of your life where your mobility is limited by a massive monthly payment. It is a decade where it is harder to save for a down payment on a house or start a family. And here is the truly scary part. Our analysis assumes you graduated from a top school and got that six-figure job. But the world of business education is a pyramid, and most people are not at the top. If you change just one or two variables in this equation, the return on investment doesn't just become slow, it becomes permanently negative. There are 4 specific scenarios where an MBA is functionally a wealth destruction device. The first way to ensure a negative ROI is to attend an unranked or lower tier program. An MBA is primarily a signaling mechanism. Top-tier employers like McKinsey, Goldman Sachs, or Google recruit heavily from the top 20 programs. They are looking for the filter that the university has already applied. Once you move outside the top 50, that prestige drops off a cliff. However, the tuition usually doesn't. There are hundreds of regional business schools charging $60,000 or $70,000 for a degree that the market simply doesn't value. If you pay $70,000 to attend a school that leads to an $85,000 job, only a $10,000 bump over your previous path, the math is broken. You will never outrun the debt. The interest on your loans and the loss of your 2 years of wages will create a financial drag that lasts your entire career. In this case, you didn't buy an investment, you bought a very expensive piece of paper that gives you the right to work the same jobs you could have gotten anyway. This is the most common way people destroy their net worth with education. The second scenario is having a high pre-MBA opportunity cost. If you are already doing well, an MBA is statistically dangerous. Imagine a software engineer or a high-performing sales professional making $110,000 at age 26. For them to quit their job means giving up $220,000 in wages. Even if they go to Harvard and graduate with a $160,000 salary, the hole they dug is so deep that the break-even point stretches into their 50s. They would have been financially superior just staying in their role, advancing their skills, and investing their surplus income. Before you apply, you have to ask, is my current trajectory already steeper than the post-MBA average? If you are already in the fast lane, paying $80,000 to get into a different fast lane usually doesn't make sense. And this leads to the third trap, the passion pivot. Many people use an MBA to move into lower-paying sectors like non-profits or marketing because they are bored with finance or tech. While that might be emotionally fulfilling, borrowing money at 8% to move into a career that pays less is a recipe for a lifetime of financial stress. We have talked about debt and lost wages, but we haven't talked about the most painful number of all. Let's look at the alternative. What if, instead of borrowing $80,000 for an MBA, you simply stayed at your job? And what if you took the amount you would have spent on that student loan payment, that $1,100 a month, and you put it into an S&P 500 index fund for 10 years? Historically, the stock market returns about 7 to 9% adjusted for inflation. Investing $1,100 a month for 10 years would yield you roughly $195,000. If you then stopped contributing and just let that money sit until you were 65, it would grow to roughly $1.3 million. By choosing the MBA, you aren't just losing the tuition money. You are sacrificing the compounding engine of the stock market during your most critical wealth-building decade. That prestige degree might actually be costing you over $1 million in retirement wealth. This is the invisible cost that no one talks about. Now, I'm not saying you should never get an MBA. I am saying you shouldn't get a traditional, self-funded one. There are better ways to get the letters without the liability. If you are determined to get those 3 letters, you need to change the math in your favour. The most effective way to do this is the part-time or evening MBA. By working full-time while you study, you entirely eliminate the $153,000 opportunity cost of lost wages. You keep your employer match, you continue building your resume, and you avoid massive borrowing. It is exhausting, yes. You will have no social life for 2 years. But from a financial literacy standpoint, it is the only way the ROI consistently stays positive. Another option is employer sponsorship. Many firms will pay for your tuition if you agree to stay with them for a few years after graduation. If someone else is writing the check for the $80,000, the math shifts instantly. You still have the opportunity cost if it is a full-time program, but eliminating the debt and the interest capitalization makes the degree a net positive much faster. Finally, for older professionals, the Executive MBA allows you to retain a high salary while checking that academic box for C-suite promotions. The key is to make sure someone else, or your own current cash flow, is footed the bill. Before we wrap up with the final conclusion, I want to invite you to join a specific group of people who are running these numbers every day. If you want to dive deeper into these kinds of forensic financial analyses, consider becoming a member of the Optimizers. Just click the Join button below this video. Members get priority replies to their comments, which is where we usually have the best debates about these ROI calculations. And you get some custom badges to show you are part of the community. It is a small way to support the channel and ensure we can keep producing these deep dives without any corporate bias. If you are serious about treating your life like a business, I would love to see you in there. Now, let's bring this home. An MBA is a business decision. Yet, it is one of the few business decisions where people let their egos override their spreadsheets. They focus on the campus tours and the networking events, while ignoring the rigid mathematics of compound interest. True financial literacy is about resource allocation. Your time, your income, and your borrowing capacity are the most precious resources you have. If the break-even point on an investment stretches beyond 7 years, or if you aren't entering a hyper-lucrative field like investment banking or top-tier consulting, you are likely buying a luxury consumer good disguised as an investment. Before you sign that promissory note, run the math for your own specific situation. Look at your current salary, your projected bump, and the cost of debt. If the numbers don't work, don't do it. I want to hear from you in the comments. Have you done an MBA? Was the ROI what you expected? Or are you still climbing out of the hole? Let's get a peer review going in the comments section. I am Tom, and this is Tom Talks Money. See you in the next one.